Welcome back to the Megatherium Club podcast. As always, my name is Spencer, and I'm here with just kidding, my name is Sean, and I'm here with my pal Zach and Spencer to share some cool organisms with you. Last time I mentioned we were going to do a little mini series on symbiotic relationships, and we discussed a few examples of parasitism in the last episode. This time we are discussing mutualism, and mutualism is when both species live in both species benefit from the symbiotic relationship that they live in. Last time, only one of the species really benefited. This time, they both do, and my example of mutualism is actually an example of pollination as well, because it's one of the, biggest examples, but not always an example of mutualism. And we're not going to go down that today, but we did throw around the idea of covering all facilitated pollination, but quickly realized that was too large of a topic for just one of us to talk about, and it deserves its own future episode. Also, at a glance, future episode of pollination, of pollinators, pollinator ecology is to be expected, so a little teaser there. My example is the classic but beautiful bumblebee. These are the fuzzy bees you might see around your yard, bigger than a honeybee but smaller than a carpenter bee, usually not as aggressive unless you stumble into their nest or try to pick them up. I hold these insects close to my heart after working with them in the Sierra Nevada mountains with Zach, and then going to grad school and focusing on pollinator conservation and educating others on their importance. But Sean, mutualism requires two organisms benefiting. You only mentioned one. This is true, but there are so many species of flowering plants that live in symbiosis with bumblebees, and other bees, of course, that it's hard to just pick one right now. I will discuss a few more specific species here in a bit, though. Let's start with pollination for those that need a refresher. Pollination is the way that many plants reproduce. Many plants can be pollinated without the aid of another organism, whether that is through self-fertilization or the aid of wind. Gymnosperms, so plants that have naked seeds, dominated the plant world up until about 150 million years ago. At this point, there was a massive boom in the number of angiosperm species. These plants usually need the aid of a pollinator, and that is just what aided this explosion of these new types of plants. Pollinators changed the game for plant evolution, and now it's hard to go anywhere without seeing a plant that benefits from some organism assisting in its pollination. It may be a surprise to some, but these first pollinating insects were not bees, they were beetles. But I said I would hold off on that pollinator talk for another day. Just a little bit more of that teaser for a future episode. Find out more when we return. Why are bumblebees and many, not all, flowering species an example of mutualism? Let's look at the flower. I already mentioned that some species of plants need a facilitator, another organism, if you will, to assist in its reproduction process. This ensures enough seeds are produced for dispersal, allows for genetic diversity from within a population, and ensures an adequate amount of fruit is produced to entice seed dispersers to come along and do their job. How would a bumblebee do that? Well, let's look at flower anatomy now. Now, this is going to be a general description, as there are way too many types of flowers to describe individually here, but imagine a lily. That's a common flower. So you got the petals, usually bright color, but not always. In the center, you have an elongated section that makes up the pistil, or the female part of the flower. Around the pistil, you have stamens consisting of a filament and an anther. The anther is where the pollen is produced. Deep within the flower, if you think of it like a cup, will be where the nectaries are located, or where the nectar is. Bumblebees and other insects are attracted to this sweet liquid. Nutrients and energy can be obtained from the nectar, and so the bumblebee will enter the flower trying to lick it up. As it does this, the bee will brush against the anthers, picking up pollen in the process. The bumblebee will then fly on to another flower looking for more nectar to slurp up. As it lands in this new flower, the pollen that was previously picked up will now come into contact with the tip of the pistil, also known as the stigma. The pollen, analogous to our own sperm, will travel down the pollen tube and into the flower ovary, fertilizing an ovule, or, analogous to an egg. Boom. The bumblebee has facilitated this pollination, increasing the genetic diversity in this plant. But the bumblebee did not do this out of the goodness of its heart. She had selfish motivations. How dare she? Searching for food for itself and for its hive. I guess that's not super selfish. I guess it's doing it for the greater good of its hive, which is less selfish. Maybe species
for
selfish.
democracy.
For democracy, yes. The pollen that it picks up along its visits can be brushed back into its corbicula, or pollen baskets, which are located on its third pair of legs. The most rear legs have this little section just perfect for holding pollen. It's a little concave and it's got some hairs, and it takes it back to its nest. Bumblebees do not store massive amounts of honey like, honeybees do to survive through the winter, but they do feed their young a mixture of pollen and nectar. Only queens born in late summer or fall will survive through the winter by hibernating, also known as diapause in the insect world. She will have to start the colony all over again come spring with the sperm that she received from a mate before going to sleep. Let's take a look at just how certain plant species have evolved alongside these pollinators. Bees, like bumblebees, can see in ultraviolet light, which we cannot. We may look at a flower and see all yellow, but in UV, it could have a pattern that attracts bumblebees and assists in guiding them to the center of the flower where the pollen and nectar are located, so the bee wastes no time in assisting the pollination process. Bees are especially attracted to blue and yellow flowers, and they cannot see red, by the way. Do you guys know what group of pollinators can see red?
Bats.
Humans.
I don't know. Yes, humans. Unless you're like some colorblind males. Someone in this
true.
talk. Zach, actually, can you see red?
I am color deficient, is what I say.
Oh, okay.
So you can see red. It's not like brown to you.
No, I can see red. I can see all of the colors, but so I'm technically not color blind. There's a difference between color blind and color deficiency. And basically for me, the color spectrum is just a little bit more blended together than it is for you.
Beautiful.
But do you guys know what pollinator group besides humans? And I don't know what spectrum bats can see. Let's think insect world. What insects can see the spectrum red?
Flies?
Butterflies.
Butterfly. Yeah, that's what I said.
Oh,
I just left out the
You said flies for short.
the slang term.
Well, yeah. Red is the preferred color to many butterfly species. But again, teaser for another episode. Flowers also have a negatively charged, or are negatively charged, while bumblebees are positively charged. And when a bee lands on a flower, this difference what's up?
In what way are they charged? Are they like...
Yeah, so it's like one atom versus another, or like the static cling. Imagine static instead of like a shock, and that's because one end is positive and one is negative, right? So that like energy moves. I'm not a physics guy, but I
wonder how they get this static buildup.
Yeah, I'm not.
Is it just like the act of like crawling around?
Yeah, I don't know.
In and out of their holes or whatever. I don't know.
I think I saw one wearing like footy pajamas one time, just like shuffling around.
Maybe it's all their pile. It's kind of like your hair static. Your hair gets staticky. Bumblebees have pile or hair, and that gets staticky. And so when it comes into contact with something else, things happen.
Yeah, well, that's a question we'll have to answer for sure in another episode.
Maybe the pollinator episode. We'll have to come back to this. Good question. But for now, bees are positive, plants are negative. And so when a bee, lands on a flower, the pollen almost jumps to the bee because of this difference in charge. So one, almost forces it to pick up the pollen, and two, the overall change of the flower now changes as the bee leaves due to this interaction. And why does that matter? Well, this charge difference is another tool to assist bumblebees and other bees in locating flowers that have the valuable resources that they're looking for. And a bee doesn't want to, waste its time visiting a flower that doesn't have the resources or that another bee's already taken. So it's like a cue that is picked up by the bee to like not waste his time visiting this flower if it doesn't have that charge. It's kind of like, I don't know, the flower's way of saying, if we're personifying it, like, yeah, give me a second. I just saw that guy. And
so
then
bumblebees have like electromagnetic sensors.
A lot of creatures do. So I think they're still looking into this, but everywhere I kept looking, I would discuss this, and I've seen it shared on social media as well. So I wanted to bring it up, but I didn't dive into the science behind it. So maybe that would be good for a future episode. The smell is another thing that attracts bees to flowers, and bumblebees are attracted to sweet aromatic smells or minty fragrances, which also explains why they like bee balm, which is in the mint family. Some plants want to increase their chances, if we're going to personify it again, increase their chances of being pollinated even more by limiting the bees and bumblebees that can successfully reach their nectaries. How does this increase their chances? Well, certain bees have evolved over the millennia to have longer tongues than others. One species of bumblebee that could rock out in a kiss cover band would be Bombus balteatus, aka the golden-belted bumblebee. These live in boreal, high-altitude areas of Eurasia and North America. These little cuties specialize on flowers with long corollas, or imagine like a tube-like structure, and at the bottom of that, that's where the nectar's at. Instead of a cup, it's more of like a party tube drink. Like you need one of those really long straws to get to the bottom.
Like a crazy straw?
Yeah.
Or did you mean like a beer bong kind of straw? By crazy
you
party
bong
straw.
beers with straws?
What?
Oh, yes. I was thinking of shotgunning beers. I was like, you don't use straws for that. Yes, yes. Yeah, it's been a while since I did that. But these golden-belted baddies are often found at these high altitudes where flowers such as Castillaja? Castillaja, thank you. Or Indian
rainbow
paintbrush. Yeah. Chrysothamnus? Rabbit brush? Did I get that one right?
Yeah, Chrysothamnus.
Or Mertensia, aka bluebells. Did I get that one right?
Yeah, that one's good.
Mertensia? Nice. So there's 3 examples of flowers that have these long corollas, and that would require a longer tongue to reach down into the bottom of it to reach the nectaries. Limiting how many insects visit you as a flower increases the chance that the next flower that the bumblebee visits is one of your own species, instead of going from a daisy to a tulip to a lily and just hoping that your pollen eventually finds another plant of your species. These plants are only pollinated by certain species of bumblebees, and so just increases the chance that the next flower that these bees visit is the same one. Some plants make it difficult for pollinators to reach the pollen because they have porosital anthers. This means anthers have enclosed the pollen inside it, and the pollen must pass through small holes in the anther in order to become free and have a chance of pollination. Bumblebees have a trick up their sleeve called buzz pollination. They contract their thoracic muscles over and over, just vibrating these anthers. They kind of just like bite down with their mandibles and just like literally just buzz, and you can hear them like forcibly trying to get the pollen, just shaking the pollen out, just vibrating their bodies. And this is why bumblebees are great at pollinating. Can you guys take a guess? What common food crop has porous little anthers?
The way you're saying porous little anthers.
Am I saying it wrong?
You're not saying it wrong. You're saying it seductively.
Porous little.
Those porous little anthers.
Those little porous little. It's not porous.
Oh, I thought you were saying porous.
No, it's Poricil. I that's how I've always.
I thought you were saying porous little anthers.
No.
That's also what I thought you were saying.
No.
Yeah,
So. No, that's hilarious though. So Poricil. Poricil. Now I'm trying to look up a better definition of this because I thought that was not a weird thing to say. Those porous little anthers. Now I understand why that's so seductive. I was like, how am I saying porous little? I thought you were just making fun of. I was like pronouncing it wrong.
No, I'm just hearing it wrong. I'm hearing what I want to hear.
You're like, I like those porous little anthers.
A porous little anther has like a top on it, and it's got pores and it's got slits on it. And they're only able to release pollen when vibrated at a specific frequency.
But
I guess it fits through the pores and the slits.
But do you guys know what common food has these type of anthers?
Tomatoes?
Yes.
Nice.
Also, eggplants, potatoes,
Potatoes.
Potatoes.
peas. Oh, manzanita does. Huh.
I'm guessing you looked it up.
Oh yeah, I'm on
He's like,
Wikipedia right
this
now.
and this. And...
He's pulling
Why,
it out.
yes,
and
I
he's like,
do know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at like just a Wikipedia list of plants pollinated by buzz pollination. And
perfect.
Yeah, I see eggplants, potatoes, tomatoes, buffalo burr, and Solanum cinereum, an Australian shrub, among others. Oh, anything in the genus Vaccinium. No, some members of the genus Vaccidium. So like
All of
blueberries and cranberries.
Yes.
Yummy.
But, so, bumblebees are much better at pollinating things that require buzz pollination, such as tomatoes, than honeybees, because honeybees are too weak to do buzz pollination.
Weak.
And actually, this is true for a lot of plants, though. Bumblebees are more efficient pollinators, bee for bee, than honeybees. It's just honeybees are capable of saturating the environment with their large numbers and eventually get the job done on a lot of other crops.
I'll saturate your porous little anther.
You porous little anthers.
This is another T-shirt.
This is the
It has like a
Club
bee
Podcast
just like
merch
rubbing.
store.
Yeah, I gotta talk to my brother about it. So.
Just a bumblebee doing like a pole dancing on a porous little anther.
Oh, you.
He's poor.
Our merch store is gonna be great.
I see where our audience is going. Like, our target audience is going. People that love just a little raunchiness in their biology
raunchiness
lesson.
in their nature.
In their nature
Just
is a
like
little raunchy.
the title of our last episode.
Yes.
Shout out to Dora, who absolutely loved it. So
I got several comments on it myself.
good.
Specifically
I had a
the
guy
title, nothing about the content, just the title.
Same. A guy said, "Hey, that was a nice title," and I don't think he listened, but he saw the title.
Oh, actually, I do have a really cool story about the episode that I'll share at the end of the episode today. So stay tuned.
Nice.
Listen for a little
If you
secret
remind me.
at the end.
Little listener mail. So
But that is what I wanted to share with you all for now about bumblebees and their relationship with many types of flowers. And if you guys want to add anything in here, because I know you guys, I'm sure, I know I missed some things and wanted to save it for another day. But the takeaway message being bumblebees, are not helping flowers because they like them out of the goodness of their hearts, but instead their process of resource foraging benefits a variety of plants by spreading their pollen, increasing their genetic diversity as well as chances for survival. These plants have evolved over the years to attract pollinators like bumblebees, making this process even more efficient. Do you guys have anything you want to add to that?
I mean, other than just like leave the bumblebees alone.
Oh, yeah.
You know, if you see them out and about, just let them do their thing.
I could preach for a while on conservation of bumblebees.
Oh, well, that might be a whole other episode itself.
It'll just be an hour monologue of Sean talking about bumblebees.
I did just.
We'll do a series of episodes called Sean Vents.
Oh,
and it'll just be that.
That would require a whole podcast.
Perfect.
I did just come from a meeting with the Xerxes Society about pollinator conservation, though that one was on monarchs, which was fascinating.
All right. Well, to continue with mutualism, I'll go next. And so last weekend, I went hiking around Devil's Lake in central Wisconsin.
Oh, that's a
cool
place.
On both, it is pretty cool. Have you been to Devil's Lake?
Yeah, that's like the one place I've been in Wisconsin.
Nice. Yeah, it was quite beautiful. I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, we got lucky because it was nice and sunny. You know, it was in March, so there was no leaves on the trees or anything, but it's still really nice. But what, the plants might not have been doing a whole lot, but growing on both the trees, and I learned the 1.6 billion year old rocks that are the rocky outcrops. They're 1.6 billion years old.
Wow.
Dude, that
Some of the
rocks.
oldest rocks in North America. But anyway, we're a few of the predicted 28,000 species of lichen. Now, I will also preference that another source that I read said the number could be up to 250,000 species of lichen. I don't know where they got that number. They didn't cite anything. My guess is maybe they're including the fossil record with that. But there's currently around 20,000 described species. So there's obviously going to be a lot more than that. Upper ends are predicted at 28,000 species. Maybe just currently on Earth. I don't know. But anyway, so if we're talking about mutualism, then how is lichen mutualistic? To the tree or to the rock? Well, it's not. You can't be mutualistic with a rock because it's not alive. The abiotic component of it means that it can't have a nice relationship with something else. And the rumor that lichen harms trees is also completely false. That's because, well, lichens can produce their own food, so there's no need to steal or parasitize from others. With a little asterisk, I'll talk about that at the end. So where is the mutualistic relationship? Well, it's the lichen itself. So when I was hiking, of course, I was talking about lichen, and somebody told me a fun, albeit kind of boring mnemonic device to understand what lichen is. I didn't know this. I just knew somebody who really liked lichen, so I just knew what lichen was. But, one, lichen is not moss. Moss are non-vascular spore-bearing land plants. Non-vascular means that they don't have a system of tubes, xylem, and phloem to move water and sap around. But lichen itself, here's the mnemonic in all its beauty. Fred fungus and Alice algae look alike to each other. I'll pause for dramatic effect.
I like that.
No, it's not a great mnemonic, but it has the answer there. So lichens are made up of fungus and algae, which we'll talk a little bit more specifically in a second. But while different lichens are referred to as different species, they are a conglomerate of 2 or 3 life forms. usually 1 to 2 species of algae or cyanobacteria, which has been commonly referred to as blue-green algae, but it's not algae. It's just cyanobacteria because they can do different things. And then usually 1 species of fungus, and the species name of the lichen is named after the fungus.
That's really interesting because like fungus, they're just discovering like that a lot of, at least in forest pathology, a lot of the sexual and asexual forms of fungi, they've been calling them different things when they're actually the exact same species.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're definitely behind in the, in the world of mycology, or, the study of fungus. There's so much, and it's so complicated. I respect all mycologists because it's just so out of my like comfort zone,
Because they're all fun
but
guys.
it's so cool because they're all fun, and I'm
you're
not.
not.
Is that what that means? Okay. Wow. No, I don't know too many specific mycologists, but I do know a few. But they're really into it. Like that's their whole. I mean, I guess we're really into entomology, and that's our whole like life. I mean, for you guys, because you do it as a career, but either way, whatever. We all have our niche. So the fungus part of lichen is incredibly good at pulling water out of the atmosphere. And it provides a stable habitat for which the algae live and do their part of the relationship. So algae can photosynthesize, which means that they can use the power of the sun to create their own food in the form of sugars, which they're more than happy to share with their partners. And the color of lichen, if you've ever been hiking in an area that has lichen, which pretty much everywhere, the color is determined by the specific photosynthetic pigment found within the algae. But the colors can range from yellow, green, orange, brown, and kind of a gray color. My favorite is kind of that moss gray, kind of very earth toned and toned down version of gray. I just love that. And then the oranges are obviously great. So since most lichens prefer to live on a rock, they tend not to fossilize. So we don't know a whole lot about them from the fossil record. However, amber specimens from Europe have had inclusions of lichen, and that's been dated to about 40 million years ago. And there even is, in some areas of Europe, fossilized lichen that can be found within chert that has been dated to around 400 million years ago. So lichen is old. It's very, very old, but we just don't know a whole lot about it and why it came to be. But essentially what's going on is lichen will lichenize. They have their own verb there. They will lichenize some sort of algae, like individual cells of algae, and they'll grow around it and form a sheath around it. And this can look anything from like dust on the top of a rock to patchworks of lichen, and then kind of branchings and webbings of lichen, lots of different shapes. But all of it is essentially the lichen, the fungus forms a sheath around the algae. And therefore that's what creates that stable environment for which the algae can, do their thing. The algae itself can live outside of the fungus. As long as they have access to water, if they're just in a pond or something, then they can survive. The fungus can't actually at this point survive without the algae. So there is a little bit of a power dynamic in terms of the fungus definitely gets a lot more than the algae does. But if you live in a place like a desert where there's not a lot of water, well, if you have a fungus that can pull water out of the air incredibly efficiently, as the morning dew or morning fog kind of permeates an area, then you're going to have access to water whenever you want it. So the algae do get stuff out of this. Yeah, that's kind of how it forms. They just form a protective sheath around them, anchor onto some sort of surface, and the surface can pretty much be anything. It's kind of crazy, and just wait there and kind of grow slowly over time. But lichens themselves, they can live all around the world, from the tops of mountains to the barnacles of a marine pier. They can be found in the harshest, driest deserts and hot, humid rainforests. but most of the time you're pretty much going to find a lot of your lichens in mountainous and tundra areas. So, but either way, essentially to find a lichen, you want to head out of the cities into a natural area. And that's just because, like I've said a few times before, fungus can pull things out of the air really well, and that includes pollution. So if you live in a heavily smogged place like California, that can actually kill lichen off pretty quickly. And that's kind of what California is actually facing right now. They're losing a lot of lichen species because there's just too much air pollution for them to survive. So their habitats are shrinking slowly and surely as the cities expand and get bigger, and the smog just keeps increasing over time. But that also makes lichen a very good indicator species of an area's environmental health. So keep them around. Now, as humans, how can we interact with lichen? Mostly just leave it alone. You can eat lichen. There's a couple of cool specific examples, which I'll get into, but whatever you do, I guess the yellow lichens tend to be poisonous. So don't eat poisonous lichen, the yellow stuff, or just in general, just don't eat lichen unless if, somebody who knows what they're doing has prepared something from it. Lichens can grow pretty slowly. A lot of species grow very slowly and they can live for decades. So if you decide to scrape off some lichen off the surface of a rock, you could have just scraped off 100-year-old organism, or technically group of organisms, and that's it. They're done, right? So just leave them alone, unless if you're, studying them or something. I don't know. And another thing is that lichen, they can be preserved. They don't live forever, but they can be preserved on the surface of a rock for hundreds and hundreds of years, which can actually be used to determine the age of an exposed rock surface based on the growth rate and the size of the area of lichen, in addition to radiocarbon dating. Thank you. The rock and the lichen itself. So you can essentially, this is, I guess it works. I don't really understand in its entirety, and it works best for rock surfaces that are less than 1,000 years old. But this would include things like Stonehenge, right? Where, I don't know if it's specifically Stonehenge, but this is just an example of how you could use it. Well, Stonehenge, if those rocks were dug out of the ground, well, as soon as they come out, they're probably going to pick up some spores of fungus who will eventually lichenize some algae and will start to form lichen. And if you know the species of lichen and that is preserved over time, if it dies or continues to grow, and the growth rate, you can determine how long a specific rock has been out of the ground, essentially, which is actually quite cool. And there's an entire field of study that specifically focuses on dating rocks using lichen.
Wouldn't that depend on, site conditions and how much sun they're getting and how much water they're getting?
I would assume that there's a lot of stuff that plays into it.
There's a lot of variables into that one.
A lot, yeah, but I'm sure they know what they're doing. And I was just trying to think what...
Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
Oh, I was going to say, I do think that lichenology, is that what you would call it? I don't know. What would you call it? Lichenology?
I didn't write down the name of it, but there is a specific name to it.
Okay. I don't know. I think lichenology, though, whatever it is actually a really understudied field. In 2018, especially in terms of diversity, because nobody really gives a shit about lichen, so nobody has bothered to go through and name a lot of them, right? But yeah. In 2018, some scientists, they climbed up coastal redwoods and discovered 137 new species of lichen that specifically grow in the canopy of tall ass redwoods.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just, I don't know. I think that's just, it's such a rich field that needs to be studied more. If we're discovering
it's a branch of mycology,
of them.
You just gotta find some
just
place
by climbing up a tree.
Yeah, just find some place that people don't go every day, and you'll find a couple new species.
So if you want to go into a rich, unexplored field, study lichen. But the use of lichen is to to determine age, lichenometry. Yeah, I have just a few more things I wanted to add about this, more so from like, well, one, also leave lichen alone because it's a vital food source for a lot of animals year round. When I was studying squirrels in the Yukon, I remember it was like, if you see a squirrel eating lichen, you have to mark it down. And I was like, what? Who the hell would want to eat lichen? That looks like it would taste like nothing. But I guess squirrels can, it's a nice food source if they're kind of out running about and they need just kind of a quick pick me up. But caribou, they eat reindeer moss, which is not moss.
Is it a reindeer?
It's a lichen species.
Oh.
It's it's a reindeer. If you didn't know, caribou and reindeer are the same things for our audience members. So, anyway,
but only one of them can fly.
Only one of them can fly with the magic of
Belief.
Elves. I was gonna say belief, but then you said elf, and I got wrapped up in that. So anyway, in kind of the modern world, lichens can actually be a really good resource for paint pigments and dyes, medicinal uses for slightly antiseptic salves. But what I remember it from, well, okay, I'll mention this one and then I'll mention the one I remember it from, is one, there's something called Iceland moss, which can be made into bread. And I guess that was pretty common throughout kind of obviously Iceland, but kind of Scandinavia just in general, is to make bread from, Iceland moss. I don't know. I would be curious to see what it tastes like.
Was it like a substitute for yeast?
No, it would be a substitute for the flour because of the sugars in it, not the yeast. But because of that, the sugars, you can also use it as a substitute ingredient in alcohol. And I had a friend who studied abroad for a couple weeks in Iceland and brought back some Icelandic alcohol for me. One of them was a birch shot. I don't remember exactly what the alcohol, like what type of it was, but it was made from birch. It had like a little birch stick in it, and it was just like a little one shot thing. And then the other one was lichen. It was a lichen shot. It was like a schnapps or something like that.
Weird. What did they taste
I did not like it. It was not, I don't like alcohol in general, so it didn't taste good to me in that aspect, but it was very earthy. Like, I know whiskey is supposed to be very earthy, but it was like, if you put like some dirt into whiskey, then that's what I remember it tasting like, which isn't, I like earthy things, but I don't like the alcohol part of it. So I'd be curious to see what just the lichen tastes on its own. So when we go to Iceland, we're going to have to pick up some bread, some alcohol, and then just the raw lichen to eat.
No, just go back to Devil's Rock, get some lichen.
That stuff wasn't very,
was it yellow?
More of there was some orange stuff, which is close enough to yellow to you, I'm sure. So I don't know if I'd want to eat it, but it also wasn't the stuff that it was like the more powdery type stuff. So you'd have to like scrape it, and then probably just scraping some rock in there too.
I feel like it's something that a non-vegan would be like, I bet vegans eat this.
Wait, you don't?
Mm-hmm.
Every day. That's why I'm saying
you're not gnawing on a rock every day.
Gross. Ugh. Well, either way, but this has been a controversial mutualistic relationship, because everything that you read, all the articles that I read, Wikipedia, all of them at the end were like, this may not actually be mutualism, but might be parasitism, because the fungus can't survive without the algae. Because they trap the algae and they control it, that it becomes this parasitic relationship based off of that. And that the algae, because it can survive on its own and doesn't need it at all, that it's basically stolen. And then the fungus is like, well, I'm going to lichenize you, and now you're forced to essentially make me food, and sucks for you, I guess.
Weird. That sounds like the beginning of You know how mitochondria and chloroplasts, like their origination is hypothesized to be basically like a bacterium being trapped in a eukaryotic cell or something like that, and it just becomes an organelle after a million years?
Yeah, I mean, well, that'd be what, probably billion. Did you say a million or a billion?
I said a million, but like I don't know. Nobody
I think
knows
at this
how
point
long that was.
we're at a billion, probably closer to that. But I mean, the fact that lichen has existed for 400 million years, and the algae still is like, I mean, the fungus is definitely.
We got another 600 million to go, right?
So 600 million years to go. Yeah. Well, there was another interesting like little statistic that I read is that they don't really know because we don't know how lichens came to be essentially, or at least the readings that I found. I'm sure some people have their ideas, and that around 7 to 8% of any fungus species can become a lichen.
Ooh.
But then that goes back to what I said earlier, where the fungus the fungus can't live without the algae. So like once it gets the algae, then it's just screwed. I don't know. It was a little confusing.
They just become dependent and soft.
Yes, I don't know. And maybe it's just because, I don't know, they're attached to a side of the rock now, and there's, like, what are you going to do then? You don't have access to really anything that you need to grow. So maybe that's what it is.
Maybe it's sort of like,
I'm not quite sure.
Maybe it's sort of like venom, where like venom takes over your body and gives you a whole ton of power, but like if venom dies, you probably die too.
Yeah. And venom can't live without a host.
Yeah.
It could be that. I mean, the idea that like an algae can live in a desert is pretty fascinating because of lichens. So there is a mutualistic relationship going on in some species of lichen, but there's enough, I think, examples of, I don't know the exact physiology of it all, but where some scientists are like, this is maybe just parasitism. For now, I'll stick to the mutualism side just because I picked it for this episode.
Because it's convenient.
Which is very, very scientific, I know. So
yeah, we need more lichenologists.
yeah.
Yeah. And little anthers. Porous
little anthers.
Porous little anthers. Okay. Zach, what do you got?
Yeah. So today I am going to talk about a really unique mutualism, and it's unique because it involves humans. And Spencer, I feel like you might have an idea of where I'm going with this. I don't know if Sean does, but in sub-Saharan Africa, humans have actually forged a very particular relationship with a bird called the greater honey guide. Have either of you heard of it before?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the scientific name of the honey guide is indicator. And if that doesn't indicate what it does, I don't know what does. Yeah, so both its common name and its Latin name refer to its tendency to lead people to honeybee colonies. And normally the honey guide might invade bees' nests in the early morning when bees are still sluggish, or they'll scavenge on bee nests that have already been taken down by honey badgers, because I guess those live in the same area too, and everything wants honey.
Except for vegans.
Yeah, not vegans, but
yeah.
I can see why everyone else wants it.
So, Sean, you don't do honey?
Correct.
Because you're a full on vegan?
Yeah, I'm no phony.
Yeah, he eats lichen.
Yeah. I just eat pine cones and dirt.
Yeah, that's what
But I removed the nematodes first because that. Yeah.
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 Yeah, everything wants honey, probably because it's very high in calories. It's really sweet, it's got a lot of sugar, so it's just like a good all-around food for wild animals and people to eat. And like I said a little bit ago, honey guides are known to lead people to these nests as part of a mutualistic relationship. There are even some honey hunting cultures that have developed a sort of two-way communication between them and the birds. So they have like this sort of call that they'll let out to let so the people will go into the forest and they have a certain call that they'll call out. It's like a trill with a little grunt at the end. And then the honey guides
Just like that?
That's that was actually surprisingly close to what it was.
I thought that was a recording that Zach played.
No, I was going to play a recording, but I don't need to anymore.
Perfect.
But yeah, anyways, the people will make the sound that Sean just made, and the honey guides have a sort of specific chatter that they'll give to the honey hunters as they're looking for honey, and they're like, hey, like, come help me raid this nest. I know where all this honey is. And they're soliciting the help of people to go and raid the honey. And yeah, like I said before, I just found some recordings of these calls. And the person does this sort of trill and a grunt. And then at the end, the bird kind of gives them a sort of chattering sound. And here. So that was actually a video put out by Cambridge University. I guess they were studying this relationship between humans and the honey guide. And yeah, you could hear the person in that video or that I was playing, or the sound bite. They were making the sound. And that's them letting the honey guides know that they're looking for honey. And then you could also hear in that video the chatter of the bird, which is them saying like, hey, I know where some honey is, follow me. And the honey guide will actually fly from tree to tree, leading the honey hunters as to guide them to the honey. And so you're like following this bird like Rafiki in The Lion King, jumping from tree to tree, and they're leading you to a tree that has a beehive in the middle. I think the reason, so this is kind of my hypothesis, but I think the reasons that the birds develop this relationship with humans in particular is because we have something that no other animal has: fire. Honey hunters come equipped with both axes and a smoking torch. So once the honey guide leads them to the honey, they're able to use the axe to hack into the tree until they expose the beehive. And they'll use the stick, the smoking stick that's on fire, to smoke the bees out and calm them down. And once the bees are calmed, the honey hunters can just basically have free reign of all of the honey in there. And they're like, in the videos that I saw, they're like pulling out these giant honeycombs. And just, I don't know, collecting all of the honey from them. And once they're done with it, they'll just leave the honeycombs basically on the ground for the honey guides to come in and eat all the bee larvae and the bees' wax. And fun fact, the greater honey guide, or honey guides in general, are some of the only birds and actually only animals that I know of that are able to digest wax, which seems like a very specialty niche thing that they are able to do.
What type of nutrients does wax provide?
I have no idea. Probably fat.
That's probably it.
That would be my guess, is it's kind of fatty. But yeah, that's just one weird thing about honey guys, is they're able to digest beeswax. And according to some African folklore, you should definitely be leaving your honey guides with some sort of gift of either some of the honey that they led you to or the beeswax. Because if you don't, the next time they're going to lead you to a lion. So be careful. And
that would be really cool if they actually did that.
if they actually led you to a lion. Yeah, I saw conflicting theories on this. There were some that said a lion or a bull elephant, or there are some cultures that are a little more superstitious, saying that you cannot leave them anything to keep them hungry, so that they'll lead you to the next beehive. So
I feel like, but overall, like there's gonna be some extra stuff for them, like on the ground.
oh yeah, definitely. Like you can't hide all of it. But yeah,
Right.
there
I
was
guess
one
I
study.
you
Sorry,
go.
what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say I assumed they weren't even eating the honey or the nest. The larvae makes sense. I thought you were just gonna be like, yeah, the smoke calms the bees, and then they just get free reign of the bees that are just like drunk on smoke in the air.
I mean, they kind of do, right? So, like, we
Yeah.
get the honey, they get the bee larva, and yeah, all like everybody wins except for the bees, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess it's mutualistic between the humans and the the birds, but not the bees.
It's not about the birds and the bees here.
Nice. That's what I was
Ah, ha, ha.
getting at. I appreciate you going all the way with
Yeah,
it.
that's what the birds and the bees are for. Going all
Sex.
the way.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Going all the way.
yep.
Thank you for the second one I was alluding to.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Yeah. Anyways, there was a study that I found that was actually looking into how much the calls are impacting this relationship, and it was actually really significant. They said that honey hunters would go out, and if they were guided, if they made these calls and were guided by a honey hunter, they said they were 3 times more likely to come across some honey, which, like, if I saw the percentages of if they did and did not have a honey guide, what was their odds of success, basically. And without a honey guide, I think it was something like 18% of the time they might find some honey. And then that would spike to 54% of the time if they had a honey guide, which was
That's
a
pretty cool.
huge jump. And they also looked into, there was another study looking into whether or not the person's call is actually like communicating with the honey guide. And they found that honey guides were I think it was twice as likely to respond to their call over any other sounds. And they would call back with their specific chatter. They have other different calls, I guess, that they use to communicate with each other or other birds, but this chatter is specific to the honey guides. And it's kind of sad because in some of the more, I guess, urban areas of sub-Saharan Africa, this relationship is starting to fall apart because people are not calling to the birds anymore. So they're kind of losing this ability to communicate with the honey guides.
Right.
Do people have, I don't know, better ways of finding the honey now?
Not that I know of. I don't know if they are still hunting for. Well, I do know that they are still hunting for honey, but I don't know if they've come up with any other better ways to find it necessarily out in the bush. The only other way I can see you being more successful at acquiring honey is if you have the beehive in your backyard, basically, and you're a beekeeper.
The bee lab at University of Minnesota has some examples of those specific apiaries that they would use in the bush. Do you remember them? Like
No.
the clay ones or the basket woven ones or the log ones. Different types of essentially beehives that people in sub-Saharan Africa have built over generations to house the bees for themselves rather than go out and look for them.
That's pretty cool.
That is really cool. I did not ever see that, I don't think, or at least I don't remember seeing it. But that's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know how often you did game night with us, but I just remembered looking at them during game night and admiring them because I remember seeing a few when I was in Tanzania. They'd be kind of out and about every once in a while. You'd see a beehive. But either way, like I don't know if I'd ever even want to bother with African bees. I when I was there, one of our study sites, there was a huge hive inside of a baobab tree. And I remember as the entomologist, the ranger that would come with us, he warned me, he's like, you like bugs, but do not go near this tree because you will die. Like, oh,
Yeah, they're
okay.
yeah, African bees are not to be messed with.
Yeah, but they're somehow not as bad as the Africanized European honeybees, which I think is absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, those are a huge problem.
Yeah, I ran into him in Puerto Rico. It stung me on the lip, and I looked like Bart Simpson.
What? I didn't know you ran into
Yeah.
Africanized bees there.
Yeah, there was a hive at one of the sites on the mountain, and the day crew people had issues with them. Of course, I think most of them got stung at that site, but we as the night crew, so we camped out because it was the middle of the mountain, and it literally wasn't worth our time to like hike in and out every day. So we camped there for 3 days, but we were sleeping all day. We'd be in our zipped up hammocks all day, and then we do our work at night. Well, after we took down camp, we had dinner, everything. On the last night, I had a bee just streamline its way right into my mustache, which at the time and even today is not very big.
Oh, I've seen pictures.
But gets stuck. Yeah, thanks. No, it's not a Ron Swanson mustache. It ran right into it, still got stuck somehow, and stung me right on the edge of my upper lip. And, I immediately swatted it away and pulled out the stinger. But, bees, as soon as it stung me, 2 more landed on my chest. So I swatted those, and I told everybody, scramble.
Run!
And, we're on the side of a mountain in the trail is a cascading waterfall, creek. And so there's one, you don't want to go underwater because they'll just wait for you to come back up because they're not that stupid. But the only way we could get away from them was to run through these super thick wall of grass. I don't really know how to describe it, but we ended up getting away from them, and nobody else got stung, and I only got stung once. And my lip hurt for a little while. But, we did our survey and we got back into camp the next morning, went to bed, and I woke up and my lip, in my sleep, had swollen up. And I looked like a Simpsons character. I walked out and I was like, it doesn't feel very good. It only lasted a day before the swelling went away. But
yeah, I'm surprised it was just one sting. You got really lucky.
Well, it was nighttime. So the fact, I guess I didn't really preface that. It was dark. So, they were supposed to be sleeping, but I guess they just weren't.
If there is anybody that I could see getting stung by an Africanized honeybee, it would be you, Spencer. That would happen to you. And to be the only person to get stung, too, that would be you.
Mm-hmm. In the worst place to get stung as well. Yeah, it was great.
But anyways, that's most of what I have on the Greater Honey Guide. But one last side note, to relate this back to our last episode, honey guides are not only rating bee nests. They, like the cuckoo finches that Spencer talked about last episode, are brood parasites.
Whoa.
Yeah. And
comes full circle.
Yeah, right? I guess they parasitize the nests of wood nesting birds, like woodpeckers that have a hole in a tree or something. I didn't really get that far into it. I was just like, oh, crazy brood parasites. And then I kept Googling sound bites of honey hunters.
This bird just really doesn't want to do any work.
No, it does
you
not.
Over there raise my kids. You get me food. This bird rocks.
It does. Yeah, it's living the American dream on an entirely different continent.
It's the most capitalistic
I
bird
wonder,
I've ever heard.
so, oh my God, that's hilarious. Yeah, the mascot of capitalism. I wonder if I go to Africa and I make that grunting noise on the bush, are they going to come to me and be like, wow, this guy knows what he's doing?
I'm just going to pop up.
And then you'll show
Spencer
me
comes
where
out of
honey
the
is?
out of the bush. He's just like,
And then I get swarmed by a bunch of African bees and I die. So, yeah.
I do think it's actually relatively common for them to try to solicit help from people, because I just Googled honey guide MP3, and there was a ton of people that from all over Africa that uploaded to some website. I don't even remember what it was, but Oh, here it is. xenocanto.org. I don't know anything about it, but I think it might be like some sort of birding wildlife website. But there are so many pages upon pages of people uploading recordings of honey guides, and a lot of them are like have notes like heard the heard the honey guide soliciting my help today. Bird heard calling, chattering, guiding call from high up in a tree in the Kologa forest. That's a quote from one of these.
Very cool.
Anyways, that's all I got on the Greater Honey Guide. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. Well, that was Mutualism, folks. Hope you enjoyed that one. Our next episode will be on commensalism, and we're going to have a guest lecturer join us for that episode. Pretty excited about it. So we'll wait on the details for that when we record the episode. And I mentioned at the beginning of the episode that I had an interesting story from last episode. So Zach, you talked about ticks, right? And you talked about how, ticks can spread diseases to humans. And
oh no, did you get Lyme disease?
No, I did not, thankfully. But I was talking to my folks the other day. So my dad's best friend has been sick, and he finally figured it out. Doctors finally figured out it's hemolytic anemia.
Oh no. Does he have babesia?
So that's what they think. So he didn't know how they got it. He just knows that he has it, and he doesn't know what the cause of it is. And my mom was listening to the episode and was like, this sounds a lot like what he has. So then called him and said, this is what you have, right? And essentially, he's going to the doctor this week, and he's going to get a blood test done to see if it's specifically that.
Oh my God.
So yeah, that was pretty cool, I thought.
That is cool. I mean, not cool that he's not feeling great, but like I'm excited by this.
Yeah, so I'll update us when he gets the test results back. But I mean, he works outside, he mows lawns, he cuts grass, so it's very possible that he got a tick. And
where does he live?
He lives in Iowa.
Oh, okay, so even more likely. I was thinking that because you are originally from Colorado.
Colorado.
I was thinking he was from Colorado. I was like, he probably didn't get a tick in Colorado, but Iowa, that's a different story.
Yeah. Well, that's all we have for you folks. Thanks for listening. We're also hoping to get some information about you all, our listeners. Tell us a little bit about yourself. So in the description of this episode, you'll find a link. Probably that's how I'm going to do it. I haven't quite decided, but that's probably what I'll do. To fill out, it'll just take less than 30 seconds to fill out. That'll help us get to know who you are, and then, suggestions for future episodes, your thoughts on the podcast. Improvements can be made, and we would like you to help us out with those improvements. So look for the link in the description. But other than that, I think we'll sign off with a good how.
How.